Hi, this is Cathy Gnatek. I continue my series on the 36 decans of the zodiac today with Aquarius III, the last 10 degrees of the sign. I've done a couple videos already on Aquarius I and Aquarius II. I'll link those below. If Aquarius I is the energy of the outsider, the person in exile, or the person who makes a deliberate choice to leave the structures of society, of what's known behind, in order to enter into the unknown. And Aquarius 2 is that energy of being confident in the outsider status, of being one's own inner authority. Then Aquarius 3 is the moment when we come back or get pulled back into life to bring some of those ideals as the outsider down into the world, but also having to understand the limitations of that effort and do so strategically. So we're going to find that people with points or planets in this part of the zodiac tend to perhaps bring some of their own history into the expression of their ideals out into the world. We're going to see that with Ronan Farrow, who has his rising degree in this part of the zodiac. I'll explore the Seven of Swords tarot card, which is associated with this 10 degrees, as well as Netsach in the Kabbalistic tree of life. And the Decanic rulers, Venus and the moon, the two relational planets, um, relate to or rule over this part of the zodiac. So there's a lot to talk about. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, it'd be great if you could like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow my channel right now. So let me first talk about Aquarius, the sign, its energy in general. For a deeper understanding of the sign, check out my video on Aquarius I. I go through the Ganymede myth that's associated with Aquarius there. I'll drop a link. But in general, Aquarius is an air sign. All the air signs are about communication, thought, ideals. They have a curious quality. This last of the air signs is about ideas and the community as a whole. The first air sign, Gemini, is more personal. It's about my thought, my exploration of my ideas. Libra, the second of the air signs, is about your thought and my thought together, right? Balancing that energy. But when we get to the last of the air signs, it's about society as a whole. So we're going to find people with points or planets in Aquarius tend to be concerned with the greater thoughts around what will benefit humanity as opposed to themselves individually. Again, I go into that a little bit more in the Aquarius I video. Saturn, the last planet we can see with the naked eye, rules this part of the zodiac, rules Aquarius, the sign. Saturn's about boundaries and limitations, what's included and what's excluded. When we get to Aquarius, it's about the energy of the great vast unknown, as opposed to Capricorn, which is the other sign ruled by Aquarius, which is an earth sign, which is more about what's included in the known. It's this earthy sign that's about ambition and creating structures in the material world. When we get to Aquarius, we're moving beyond that into, as I said earlier, the first decan of the sign has to do with kind of exile. I'm leaving home and I'm going to explore my own thought. And so the last thing to understand about Aquarius is it's a fixed energy sign. So it has a stable, enduring, consistent quality, the desire to create thought structures that benefits the world. Think, the guy who wrote the Communist Manifesto, escaping my mind for the moment. I am a little older and that happens. It's going to come to me, Karl Marx. So think Karl Marx, that idea of coming up with a system can be very Aquarian. And then when we get to the second decan, the third decan of the sign, one of the things we can use to differentiate it from the other decans is which planets rule the decan. And for Aquarius III, it's Venus and the moon. Both are quite relational planets. Venus is the ruler under the triplicity system, and Venus is the goddess of love and attraction, harmony and beauty, pleasure, values, but also justice and connection, how you receive love. The moon, of course, represents our body, and it represents memories as well, our history, because memories are stored in the body. You can think about the unconscious as being related to the moon, whereas the sun is related to what we're aware of, conscious energy. The moon relates to mother and nurturing emotions, also our inner life, our intuition, and our instinct. And we see that people have points and planets, as I mentioned earlier, in this part of the zodiac, where it's like they're being drawn back into the real world around their ideals, whatever their ideal structure that they've come to know for themselves, because they're centered in their own inner integrity. The energy of this last part of the Decan is, okay, what do I do with those ideals that I've come to know when I encounter situations in my own personal life that maybe bring up my own memories or my own karma, you could say? How do I bring them back into the world? What difficulties might I encounter? And so we see this is a decan that's ruled by Saturn, which is about limitations, but also Venus and the moon, which are about harmony and connection and nurturing. So you put those planets together, and that's the vibe of somebody with points or planets here, perhaps a seriousness around wanting to bring those ideals into the world in a way that's nurturing and harmonious and promotes justice. We see this with Ronan Farrow, who has his rising degree in this part of the zodiac, and I'll talk about that at the end. So we really see the energy of the conflictual nature of this part of the zodiac in the Seven of Swords card, where we see a figure and he's slipping away from camp, carrying away as many swords as he can. He's glancing back over his shoulder. Two swords remain behind, and the image suggests partial success or a conscious decision to take that which is possible. But you can see here, it's not a clear-cut situation. He's not taking all the swords and leaving forever, right? There's some connection that remains. This is a card that can have to do with strategy rather than confrontation. There's no open battle here. Instead, there's timing and awareness, and he's carefully maneuvering to be able to take these away. The situation is complicated enough that you cannot simply win outright and walk away untouched. You must decide what can be carried forward and what must stay behind. It's interesting. Austin Coppock has a series on the Decans, a class that I took as well. And he refers to this part of the zodiac as the Gordian knot. And he talks about the fact that people with placements here can have a temptation, with the Gordian knot, it's really so complex, it's very difficult to untie. So there can be a temptation to just cut it, to break free. And so, or the other possibility is to go through the long, hard strategic work to untangle the threads of the situation that you're in. And this is the two-sided energy of this part of the zodiac and there can be people. I noticed a couple of people, I think Sylvia Plath, and another person who had their rising degree in this part of the zodiac. And there's sort of a decision to just cut through and end things as a way to resolve the tension of the complexity of the energy of this part of the zodiac. At the same time, there can be an enduring quality. People with points and planets here may endure the tension of the unknown around thought and the very important and painstaking work that it can take to bring their thought, their ideal into the world, and how that is tied to their own circumstances of origin. Again, we see that with Ronan Farrow. I'll get into that example later, but it's a clear example. So it's complex, and all the sevens in the tarot deck, as well as all of the last 10 degrees of the fixed signs, have this quality of enduring a situation for the sake of manifesting something in the world that's important, being able to stay present to the unknown and sort of be worked over, have your ideals worked over for the sake of something greater in the world. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Yeah, and I think the last bit that I've written there just talks about this idea of entanglement around thought as part of the energy of this part of the zodiac. And then let's move to the tree of life, the Kabbalah, this Hermetic text. There's also the ancient ancient Jewish Kabbalah, but I'm talking more here about the Hermetic notion or the Hermetic Kabbalah. So the Kabbalah's tree of life is a mystical diagram that represents the descent of divine inspiration into the world, into the material world. And there's this lightning flash that goes from Keter to Chokmah to Bina to Hesed and so on, all the way down to Malkuth. It traces the flow of creative energy from divine source at the crown to the physical world at the bottom. This process illustrates how spiritual concepts can take form and manifest in reality, connecting the divine to the earthly realms. And so when we get to the 7, we've moved from Tifereth, which is the heart at the center of the Kabbalah, this balanced point of knowing, into pushing forward into the world more deeply, where you're going to encounter potential obstruction. And so there's a certain amount of faith and endurance to maintain the energy to understand and be worked over, let's say, by the divine for the sake of manifesting something new in the world. And so the number 7 on the tree of life corresponds to Netsach, the sphere of desire and endurance on the pillar of mercy. It is about attachment, persistence, and what we are still emotionally tied to. So think back to the Venus moon quality of this deck, and you can see that emotional connection in this part of the zodiac, still being tied in some ways to our history. Moon, embodied understanding, karma, around ideals. And we're going to see this. I keep saying we're going to see this with Ronan Farrow, but it really does tie it all together when you get to his example at the end. So moving from the 6 to the 7 shifts us from clarity into complication. Tifereth knows the ideal. Netsach asks, what happens when desire, frustration, and loyalty get involved? Netsach here teaches that some bonds linger. In Aquarius, this can show up as sharp critique mixed with continued involvement, wanting distance but not fully leaving. The lesson is simple but uncomfortable. You may not be able to carry everything in your ideal forward. You must decide what stays, what goes, and what still holds you. So I just wanted to quickly show that what I believe I mentioned before, which is all the 7s in the tarot deck correspond with the last 10 degrees of the fixed signs in the zodiac. And they are all about endurance. It's sort of marks the testing of harmony in real life, endurance with faith, the will to keep moving forward when ideals meet resistance and the world becomes complicated and messy. So we have the earth notion of endurance in the midst of the unknown with the 7 of Pentacles and Taurus 3. And that's all about, well, I've done all this hard work to create something. What if a storm comes along and destroys my crop? I have to stay present to that possibility and keep holding on to my project, even though knowing it may fall apart. And then we have the fire type of endurance, which is I am this inspirational force bringing a creative spark into the world. What do I do when I encounter resistance to how amazing I am? Leo 3. And then we have the Scorpio endurance, which is the water energy of longing to connect, you could say, with the divine or connect with source. To connect with other people. All water's about emotions and containers and connecting. And what do I do when I'm in this moment where I have all of these multiple desires and longing to connect, and I'm not sure which one is for me? How do I stay centered in myself in the midst of all these dreams without losing my inner direction? And then, of course, I already talked about the swords airy energy of thought and how it must endure in the face of critique and possible confrontation around bringing these new ideas into the world. And so we really see this exemplified with the chart of Ronan Farrow. What needs to happen with the swords, the Seven of Swords, is to be strategic about bringing that new idea in the world in a way where it will actually manifest, to be careful. And so we see here Ronan Farrow. There's so much I could talk about, and I'll try to go through this step by step because it's a little complicated bringing in all these ideas. This is a complex Decan. Ronan Farrow was an American, or is an American investigative journalist, lawyer, and author. So he's the son of Mia Farrow and Woody Allen. He's actually best known for his New Yorker reporting on sexual abuse allegations against film producer Harvey Weinstein. It's work that helped fuel the whole Me Too movement, and he earned the 2018 Pulitzer Prize for public service for that work. And also, so this is the thought that he manifested in the world. Where did it come from? Where did his thought or idea or his grappling with his ideals around this topic, what's it rooted in? His own family. Remember, the moon and Venus are the Decanic rulers, and moon is about, in some ways, our own embodied existence in this lifetime. And he had a sister who accused her father, Woody Allen, of sexual abuse. His sister's name was Dylan, and he supported her. Ronan Farrow supported his sister in this. And then he took up, this is the path he took for his investigative journalism, was to look at sexual abuse in the entertainment industry. So I just want to think a second to make sure that I don't miss anything. Oh, so that's the whole idea of we're bringing forward, it's not just any ideal, it's an ideal rooted in our own history and what draws us back into the world to want to try and express these ideals in the world. And the last piece I wanted to talk about was showing how the need for, or the capacity for strategic decision making around presenting these new ideas in the world is really shown with with Ronan Farrow. Because when he did his investigative journalism, he took steps to make sure that he was strategic and deliberate on how he was bringing it forth, because he's actually attacking these huge public institutions. There were a lot of people, very powerful men, that were brought down by his reporting, and he understood the need to be careful how he approached this. In the Weinstein investigation, he spent months cultivating his sources, securing on-the-record testimony, and documenting intimidation before publication, building the story methodically in anticipation of the legal and institutional kickback and resistance. So we see there the Seven of Swords card, because there's a way in which he did all this work behind the scenes without culture knowing he was doing this work before he presented it. So there's that quality of capacity for strategy that really shows in his chart. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I really love making these videos because they just deepen my own understanding of the zodiac. You can never go too deep. I'm a Scorpio rising. So if you have some additional information about your own chart, how this manifests for you. I'd love to hear it. That's the best way to learn, is to learn from people's real subjective experience of the energy of the planets and points in their chart. So I'll see you soon for Pisces 1. We're almost done with this Decan walk.